Chapter 15. The first time I said no and meant it. No is not rejection, it's resurrection. I didn't realize how many ways I'd been apologizing for my existence until I tried saying no out loud. Chapter 14 was about no longer shrinking, no longer walking into rooms like a guest, no longer apologizing for breathing. But here's the truth. Even when you stop apologizing, life has a way of testing whether you really believe in your own worth. And my test came in the form of a single phone call. For years, I was the guy people called when they were in chaos. Didn't matter if it was 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, I'd pick up, I'd rush out, I'd fix things, I'd rearrange my own life to clean up someone else's mess. At first, it felt noble. It felt like loyalty. But eventually, I started realizing what it really was. I was trying to earn my place in their lives. Every yes I gave was another way of saying, please don't leave me. It wore me down, quietly, slowly, until I couldn't tell where I ended and where other people began. I was living on other people's schedules, other people's emergencies, other people's validation. My life was a rented room, and the rent was my constant self-abandonment. That Wednesday afternoon, the one I described in the opening, was supposed to be like all the others. Phone rings, panic on the other side, me rushing in. But this time, something inside me broke. Or maybe it healed. I don't know which. What I do know is that when my lips formed the word no, it felt like my chest cracked open and air rushed in for the first time in years. It didn't feel triumphant at first, it felt terrifying. My heart pounded like I had just committed some crime. My hand shook. I hung up the phone and waited for the fallout, for the anger, the rejection, the end of whatever fragile connection I thought I had with that person. And when it didn't come, when the silence lingered instead, I realized something. The only one who had been holding me hostage all those years was me. I didn't just say yes out of kindness. I said it out of fear. Fear that if I didn't perform, I'd be abandoned. Fear that if I set boundaries, I'd lose love. Fear that if I put myself first, I'd be exposed as selfish, unworthy, difficult. That's when I understood yes can be its own addiction, not the chemical kind, the emotional kind, the addiction to approval, the addiction to being needed, the addiction to playing savior so you don't have to face your own wounds. And like every addiction, it gave me a high at first, the high of being thanked, the high of feeling important, the high of avoiding conflict. But just like every addiction, the crash always came. Exhaustion, resentment, emptiness. Saying yes when your soul means no is a slow kind of self-destruction. It looks polite on the outside, but inside, you're erasing yourself piece by piece. After that first no, guilt hit me like withdrawal symptoms. I sat in my apartment pacing, rehearsing arguments in my head, thinking of ways I could call back and apologize. I thought about saying, I didn't mean it, or I was just tired, just to undo the boundary I had finally set. That's the thing. When you've spent years living small, freedom feels like danger. Saying no feels like betrayal. Protecting your energy feels like a crime. But then, underneath the guilt, came something else. A quieter voice. Relief. For once, I didn't betray myself. For once, I didn't abandon my own body to rescue someone else's chaos. For once, I stayed with me. The first no was the hardest. The second wasn't easier, but it was clearer. The third came with less shaking in my hands. By the fifth, I realized something radical. The world doesn't end when you set a boundary. People might get angry, they might pull away, they might stop calling, but what you gain in return is something no one else can give you: self-trust. And self-trust is oxygen. When you stop betraying yourself, you start believing in yourself. And when you start believing in yourself, you stop needing everyone else to. But here's the part nobody tells you. Once you start saying no, life gets quiet. Too quiet. Because all those fake connections, the ones built on your exhaustion and your compliance, start to fall away. I remember sitting alone one Friday night, phone silent, no texts, no invitations. My old reflex was to panic. See, you're alone now. You should have said yes. At least then you'd have people around. But instead, I sat in that silence, and slowly I realized it wasn't loneliness. It was space. Space for new friendships. Space for my own dreams. Space to hear my own voice again. That silence wasn't punishment. It was the sound of my life finally making room for me. But here's the thing about silence. It has two sides. One side is freedom. The other side is temptation. And soon enough, I found myself face to face with both. That first week after saying no, I thought the hard part was over. I thought the guilt was the worst of it. But then the silence came, and the silence was louder than anything. My phone didn't buzz like it used to. No desperate texts, no last-minute calls, no late-night emergencies. It was quiet, too quiet. And when you've built your entire identity around being needed, quiet feels like erasure. I didn't know who I was without other people's chaos. Without their demands, I felt exposed, vulnerable, restless, like I had no purpose. That's the dangerous thing about people-pleasing. It convinces you that usefulness is the same thing as worth. That if no one is pulling at you, you must not matter. So that silence, it almost dragged me back. I remember one night, pacing my apartment like a caged animal. My chest was tight. My thoughts were racing. The old reflex kicked in. Just call 'em back, say you're sorry, fix it. At least then you'll feel needed again. At least then you won't feel this emptiness. It hit me then I wasn't missing them. I was missing the distraction of them. Their chaos had been my cover, a way to avoid my own. That's when I grabbed my notebook. I sat down and wrote the truth of that moment. I am restless. I am tempted, but I am not going back. And with every line I felt a little more anchored. That night, writing was my lifeline. Naming the truth out loud kept me from collapsing back into the old script. But the war didn't end with one victory. The voices in my head kept coming. You're selfish. They're going to hate you now. You'll end up alone. You've changed, and not for the better. It was wild to notice how those voices didn't even sound like me. They were echoes, echoes of the people who benefited from my lack of boundaries, echoes of childhood where saying no wasn't safe, echoes of a system that teaches you your value is in your labor, your sacrifice, your compliance. I had to start answering back, not with fancy affirmations, but with simple truths. No, I'm not selfish. I'm allowed to have limits. No, I'm not unlovable. The right people won't leave just because I set boundaries. No, I'm not alone. I'm just clearing space for real connection. It wasn't about silencing the voices. It was about refusing to obey them. Here's the part that stung most. Some people didn't come back. When my yes dried up, so did their affection. They stopped calling, stopped checking in, stopped pretending they cared about me outside of what I could provide. At first, I took it as rejection, proof that I really was unworthy without my usefulness. But then I realized their absence wasn't rejection. It was revelation. They were never really with me in the first place. They were with the version of me who bent over backwards for them. And if that's all it took to lose them, then I didn't really lose anything. Still, it hurt. Letting go always does. But here's what I learned. Every no you say filters your life. It reveals who's genuine and who's conditional, who loves you for you and who loves you for what you give. And though it feels like loss at first, what you're really losing is dead weight. Here's the secret no one tells you. Saying no creates space for a new kind of yes. When I stopped being available for everything, I started being available for the right things. My yes became valuable again, not a reflex, but a choice. I said yes to rest, yes to projects that mattered, yes to people who respected my boundaries, yes to quiet mornings without my phone, yes to walks where I actually noticed the sky, yes to my own healing. And slowly, those yeses started building a life that felt like mine. Not borrowed, not drained, not conditional, mine. The first time I said no, I felt like I was breaking some unspoken contract with the world. But over time, I realized the opposite was true. I wasn't breaking the contract. I was rewriting it. Because here's the truth. Every time you betray yourself to keep others comfortable, you reinforce a world where your worth is negotiable. But every time you choose yourself, even in small ways, you're teaching the world how to treat you. That's the real power of no. It doesn't just protect you, it redefines you. But just when I thought I was starting to master it, life handed me the ultimate test. A moment where saying no wouldn't just disappoint someone, it would risk the one thing I still feared losing most. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting across the table from someone I had once thought I couldn't live without, a person who knew my history, my weaknesses, my desperate hunger for connection. They leaned in, lowered their voice, and asked me for something I knew I couldn't give. Something small on the surface, but big in its cost. Something that would drag me right back into the cycle I had fought so hard to escape. My chest tightened, my hands fidgeted under the table, my old reflex screamed inside me, "Say yes, don't rock the boat, don't risk losing them." I opened my mouth and felt the words rise up like they always had. But then I stopped. I remembered that first phone call, the pounding in my chest, the relief that came after I finally said no. I remembered the silence that had tested me, the notebook pages filled with truths I had clawed out of myself, the walks where I relearned how to breathe. I remembered the way my no had started filtering my life, how the wrong people fell away, but the right kind of peace stayed. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about them. This was about me. My yes would cost me my freedom. My number would cost me their approval. The question was simple. Whose life was I going to live? So I said it. Clearer this time. Steadier. Heavier. No, I can't do that. They blinked. They leaned back. The silence between us stretched sharp and heavy. I braced myself for anger, for guilt trips, for manipulation. But what came next stunned me more than anything. They laughed. Not a joyful laugh, a dismissive, cutting laugh. "You've changed," they said, like it was a bad thing. And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I didn't try to explain. I just nodded. "Yeah, I have." That was it. The conversation ended. The relationship ended. And when I walked out of that room, I thought I would collapse under the weight of what I had just lost. But instead, I felt taller, lighter, freer, because saying no in that moment wasn't just about refusing them. It was about choosing me. It was about declaring that my life was mine again, not a commodity, not a doormat, not a series of reluctant yeses strung together to make other people comfortable. The days that followed weren't easy. I grieved. I doubted myself. I replayed the conversation 100 times, wondering if I had been too harsh, too cold, too final. That's the sneaky part of boundaries. They can make you question your own sanity. But beneath the noise, a deeper truth held steady. I had finally refused to abandon myself. And once you taste that kind of loyalty to your own soul, you can't unlearn it. I started noticing the ripple effect. My energy shifted. My posture shifted. My voice grew steadier in rooms where I used to shrink. I stopped apologizing for pauses in conversations. I stopped over-explaining my choices. I stopped rushing to fill silence with nervous chatter. I began to realize that no wasn't just a word, it was a lifestyle, a way of protecting the most sacred parts of me from erosion. And the best part, my yeses became richer, more alive. When I said yes to something now, it carried weight. It meant something, because it wasn't coming from fear. It was coming from freedom. Here's the hardest truth I had to accept. Not everyone who loves you can handle your no. Some people will see your no as a rejection of them instead of a protection of you. Some will push harder. Some will leave. And if you're wired like me, that loss will sting deeply. But the right ones, they won't just tolerate your number. They'll honor it. They'll thank you for it. Because they'll know your no makes your yes more trustworthy. That's how you know the difference between those who use you and those who love you. The ones who love you aren't threatened by your boundaries. They're relieved by them because they want the real you, not the hollowed-out version who agrees to everything and resents it later. It was weeks later when I truly knew the shift was real. Someone asked me for a favor, not unreasonable, but not something I had the capacity to give. And without flinching, without guilt, I said, "I'm not able to do that right now." And then I went on with my day. No spiraling, no apologizing, no overthinking. That was when it hit me. I hadn't just said no. I had finally believed I was worth the number. But here's the thing. Every time you claim a new version of yourself, life will test it. Saying no wasn't the end of my battle. It was the beginning of a new kind of responsibility. Because once you stop apologizing for existing, and once you start saying no like you mean it, you enter the most dangerous and beautiful stage of all, learning how to live unapologetically in your own skin without losing the softness that makes you human. And that's where the next part of my story begins. The first no set me free. But the real test wasn't in refusing others. It was in facing the question I had avoided my entire life. What will I finally say yes to when I no longer have to prove my worth?